So, welcome, folks. Today, I have amazing news to share, and we're going to start something different as well today. We have someone to introduce you to. It's Rachel Miller. Rachel is our new chief evangelist, and her story is amazing because she went from client to evangelist and a lot in between, because we have a beautiful relationship that we cultivated like a work relationship even when we were not working together. So it's a real pleasure to welcome you, Rachel, and the stage is yours as our chief evangelist. Now you're the boss. I'm here just to contribute.
Nice. Thank you, Daniel. I'm so happy to be here. It feels so good to be having this conversation. I think we're going to get through a lot of really useful stuff for folks, and I'm just so happy to be here. This is going to be such a fun conversation. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about, because this is always floating around in my awareness as a non-technical founder. And you and I have talked about this several times, but it's why do dev shops have such a bad rap?
Love it.
Why? Yes. And we had a conversation about this probably like a week or so ago about how whenever non-technical founder and software development is found in the same conversation, for whatever reason, wherever you are, we need to take 5 to 10 minutes to disparage and deprecate dev shops just so no non-technical people will use them. And so let's talk about, why is this? Why?
I really love that you started with the hard stuff. Let's go straight to the point. People are wary of agencies and dev shops because they should. Because we as a community have, and I like to think that Season is the exception, but we as a community, as the full market of dev shops, we have failed to convey how hard software development is in reality. When I reflect on the failures, because Seasoned is my third agency, I've made the mistakes myself. Not only I seen them in the market. I think that's the biggest one. We think that because software is all around us, because we live in a world of applications, we think they're easy because they're ubiquitous. So because they're all around, we think this is gonna be somehow easier than it is. And that's the first one. There's a lot to working with agencies, and I would love to have a longer conversation for as long as we need, but I would like to start with this one. Building software is really, really, really hard. And when a client comes to us and we act as if it weren't.
Right, which I think a lot of dev shops do. So we should talk about that too. Like why is it that it became kind of culturally accepted in this professional arena for dev shops to kind of more or less lie and say, hey, that's a great idea. We can do this easily. Like, why is it that happened, and why did it stay reinforced over time?
I think we lied to ourselves first. I don't think any agency thinks, oh, I'm gonna pretend here that something is easier because I want the client, or I think some people do that unconsciously, but the first lie is to ourselves. We underestimate the challenge of building software, and that's because I don't know if that's the only reason, but one reason is we get excited with technology. We feel like when we want to build something for us, we can just think it and then build it, because we know the language how to do that. But once we have to interact with the real world, imagine I thought something, I built it, and then I brought to the world, and then I understood that that's not how things work, and then I understood that there was this external service that we needed to communicate with, and the communication is messy for some reason. And then our users start telling us that this thing that we thought is not helping them. Then we need to change it. And then the leap from I thought I built to I thought I built, I iterated on it, I understood the complexity of the human endeavor. And then I had to translate the human endeavor into software. That's the biggest complexity, translating the human endeavor into software. But there's also technical rabbit holes as well. So it's a very complex world, the software world.
And I also think too, like another layer of complexity on there is the relationship between the dev shop and the client. Because not only are these, technical rabbit holes existing, and just the ability to translate a human need into software, that whole level of complexity. There's also like if the client goes and talks to their users and gets some idea of what needs to take place, what needs to happen, right? And it's probably a fuzzy, rough idea. It's not always super clear.
Yeah.
And then they have to go and communicate this to a dev shop, like, hey, this is kind of what I got. It's like so much insight and nuance gets lost within that process. Yeah. And this is something we're going to talk about soon too, is like the process and the methodologies and the technologies that underpin what Season does and why that makes you guys so incredibly different from any other dev shop out there. But I just wanted to speak to even the complexity between just simply communicating ideas from all of these different people throughout that timeline.
Yeah, I think that the human endeavor is not only outside our client's company, it's inside and is within the relationship dev shop client or agency client. Yeah. I don't know. I think what happens is that because there's so much demand for building software, people get carried away. And I'm talking about developers and entrepreneurs that start agencies. They get carried away. They somehow, and I won't say we somehow get confused about the amount of demand we have. It's so easy for people to need us that it looks like maybe we're better than we actually are, or it's easier than it actually is. One of the two. Whenever I see today a developer switching jobs, for example, I know this is a tangent, but it makes it will come full circle. An individual developer can start his or her career today, get their first job, put their title as software developer on LinkedIn. Within a few months, they will be approached by so many recruiters that they will eventually land the job for which they're not qualified yet, but the person on the hiring side is willing to take the risk and invest because it's so hard to find developers. So you start a bubble this way because you have an overpriced developer in the market. Yeah. And then a year or so, sometimes less. Now we had a correction in the market, so it's not as outrageous right now, but it was up until, 3 months ago, it was like less than a year, you would get a proposal for which you're not qualified again, and you double your salary. Someone who's not mature enough to understand their level of craft will get carried away. They will get carried away. First of all, because they don't have a point of reference. In a market where everybody is new, like at least 50% of the developers have less than 5 years of experience. And that comes from a statistic that says that the number of developers double every 5 years, and by consequence, you have at least 50% of developers with less than 5 years of experience. So you're looking around, You're seeing you look good when you compare yourself, but you don't have a good benchmark in terms of what's this craft at its highest. You don't know it.
Wow, this is fascinating. I think what I'd love to know from you, because Daniel, you're such a visionary, you're so innovative, and you're also like a wonderful CEO. Like, you're very good at developing others. Like, you're really good at noticing what people can improve on, how they can develop themselves personally. So I'd love to just take a little moment for you to offer a piece of advice to software engineers based on everything you just shared. Like, not having that benchmark, how does a software engineer ensure that they're actually growing and perfecting their craft and not getting caught up in this, oh, I just got poached again and my salary just doubled kind of environment?
Open source.
Okay.
That's the answer, because the open source community will tell you the truth no matter what. They will not allow you to add bad code to their code base. They will not allow you to make a decision you haven't thought through very well.
Okay.
And sometimes it's even harsh to be inside an open source community, because sometimes you can even people can let you down, make you feel bad about your skills, because they will be so assertive. They will tell you straight on if they think your code sucks. If you contribute to an open source project or multiple open source projects, and you make sure you're always working on open source, you will get better. There are other things people can do, but open source is the best training for every kind of developer.
That's so interesting. I think where I want to go next, I mean, there are about a dozen places we can go.
Can I propose something? I would love for you to tell us briefly your story. Tell us about CloseGap. Tell us about what you do and what brought you here, because I think this will be of great value to people.
I think I'll start with my experience as a non-technical first-time founder, trying to figure out how I was going to build software. And really where it started was I was told, well, you're told a number of things as like a non-technical first-time founder, which is one, like, you should learn how to code. So that's like one option you get. It's like, learn how to code. And then another option is find your co-founder, CTO, technical soulmate. That's your other option. And so when I first started out, those were the two things that everyone told me, right? And that's kind of what you get blasted with in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, which is where I was at that time. You know, it's like you're either going to find your co-founder, CTO, or you learn how to code, or you don't build software. And for me, I had experienced this problem set that I knew that if we applied software to it, it could really bolster the current system of care that existed. And I'll get into what that means now. So what I wanted to build was something that would make it really easy for school counselors, school social workers, teachers, and administrators within K-12 schools to support the mental health of kids. And I knew that technology would be a useful thing to use in this scenario, because what happens is there are schools where there are over 600 students for every one school counselor. That's a statistic here in California. And no one school counselor can support the emotional health needs of 600 students. That is insane. We know that. Impossible. And even just to add on a bit more complexity, they're underpaid, they're overburdened, they're not respected, they're not cherished. And so imagine being tasked with supporting 600 students under those constraints. And so I knew, looking at this kind of problem set, okay, well, if we build software that makes it really easy for kids to ask for help when they need it, and then that software were to triage kids and say, hey, these are the 5 kids that really need support right now. these are the 10 to 20 kids that could use support maybe tomorrow or maybe the next day, that would enable schools and school counselors, all of the staff roles who support kids, to move from this reactive approach of all of these kids having behavioral issues, mental health crises, to a proactive approach. School counselors knowing exactly who needs help when. Technology, that's software. That's a software problem. And and no one else was building it. I didn't see any technologists out there that were building it. So me, even being a non-technical person, I knew, oh, no, this does need to exist in the world. And for me, learning how to code was not something I wanted to spend my time on. I'm the sort of person who orients myself toward my strengths, right? And everyone does things differently, but I believe that with the limited time we have in our lives, like, double down on your strengths. Like, yes, your weaknesses suck. That's a bummer, but you have your strengths. And so that was always my mindset. So I was like, I'm not learning how to code. And then the other one was I spent, several, at least like 1 to 2 years really looking for this technical soulmate. And that's what it felt like. I was looking for this romanticized version of this CTO who was going to change my life and solve all my problems. Like, really, it was silly, this kind of, this mindset or this narrative. And so it was extremely challenging. And what I decided was that my radar always goes off when someone says, this is the only way you can do it. I'm always like, no, something's wrong here. We have to do it another way. And so that was kind of my non-technical journey. And once I found you guys, once I found Seasoned, everything kind of got flipped on its head. And I had been told the entire time, don't use agencies, don't use dev shops, like, beware, don't go near dev shops. And, I met you guys, and it was actually shocking how quickly you guys became a true extension of the team, how I really knew that I could trust you guys to build the right thing. Like, one thing that people should know about Seasoned is you don't let your clients build nonsense. You actually care about the entrepreneurial journey of your client. And whereas I think so many other dev shops will just kind of let their clients build all of this stuff without testing the ideas in the market and doing it appropriately. And so for me, so much trust had been built in the beginning, and you guys really became an extension of the team, that my experience was like, oh, no, people should absolutely use dev shops. 100%. You just need to make sure that they're the correct ones. And like, I would love to turn it over to you and ask, how do you think Seasoned is different from the other agencies that exist? Because Seasoned is an outlier. And why is that?
I hate that we are, but I think we are an outlier. Yeah. And I really mean it, that I hate that we are, because I would prefer that clients got to us without having spent all their money before meeting us in bad agency. I would prefer that they were successful at great agencies and then came to a point where they were a great fit for us, not because we're the only ones that are good, but because we're a fit. And then we would work with clients. There's so much demand for software and so few great dev shops out there that I would love to see more and more and more. And I think we will start. And maybe this is a challenge for you. Let's start a movement to build better dev shops. Yeah, because I think we should. But why are we different?
Or go ahead. There was a thought that just popped into my mind. I want to speak to the fact that software is eating the world, right? Mark Andreessen has said that about a billion times. And the truth is, software really is eating the world. And no longer is it going to be like two dudes in a garage in Silicon Valley that are the only people who are building software. Like, that's just not true anymore. And while that's a design or a model that typically works well when you want to build a startup in software, it's not the only way that people go about building software. And so I would love to open it up. Something in my journey too that I considered was no code solutions, or how to create a paper prototype, So let's open it up as well, just to all of the different options that exist when someone's looking at
Yeah.
how do I go about building software?
Yeah, I love it because agencies, even though we're here to talk about agencies because we are one, agencies are only one of the options.
Yeah.
Just like a technical co-founder is only one of the options.
Yeah.
Just like learning to code is only one of the options. But today you can learn how to no code, and especially with bubble.io, you can get really far with a no-code product. It has advantages and disadvantages. For us, it wasn't the best path as a company to start a professional service.
Yeah, for those who don't know, what is bubble.io and what does it enable people to build quickly?
Bubble.io is a no-code programming platform. You can build web apps with it without writing one single line of code. And I mean real apps, not just the mockups and the workarounds that we usually see with other no-code alternatives. Real apps. I come from a different generation. I learned to think in code. So when I use Bubble, I feel like there's so much missing because I know where code is today.
Yeah.
But only because I have this experience. When I see other people going to use Bubble, they can easily spend the first 2 years of their software or more. I interviewed people that are using Bubble for more than 4 years in a real startup.
Okay.
And they don't think they will move away from it. But Bubble is also only one of the options. You have plenty of no-code app builders, and right now you have Webflow is a website creator that's stepping into the programming side because yesterday they started the beta for their logic functionality, where you can say, if this happens, then we do this. And then we start to feel more like programming inside Webflow. But this is new. They're still a closed beta. They released, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday.
Wow. Like, what founders should consider using bubble.io or Webflow or any number of these no-code solutions?
In a sense, which type of founders or what should they consider?
I would say what sorts of problems could be solved using these solutions? And then also, what are the drawbacks of using no-code solutions? Because those need to be spoken to as well.
The biggest drawback is that you might end up having to throw it all away when you move to code. Right. You can do it iteratively. No, there's no need to do it in a one big rewrite in code. You can figure out ways of doing it without being too much of a big project. But that's one of the takeaways. Whenever you need code, you're gonna have to move away from no code, right? But there are some things that are easier to build with code than with no code. And if you have access to developers or you know how to code, it will be better to use code. With that said, I think almost all use cases can start with no code. I think I'm a very lean startup kind of guy, and I mean it in an extreme way. I always want to start minimal. I always want to do things that don't scale first, and then only scale in time. That's why, to be honest, that's why I built an agency. Talk about things that don't scale, right?
Yeah.
But I love this game of trying to scale the things that don't scale.
Right.
So for me, whenever I think of a problem, I know how to go to the place where I can start with no code. The only reason I wouldn't start with no code is money is less scarce than my time. So I'm I have a hard time to find time to invest, to do manual stuff, etc., etc. But I do have money to spend. Then you can build your product directly with code.
Right.
Otherwise, even for us, the best clients have already done some validation with no code, or you guys have done paper
Yes.
prototypes, code.
Yes.
You validated so much before getting to us that when you got to us, you knew what you had to build.
100%.
And that's why we were able to be fast building your MVP. Not because
Sure.
the MVP was complex. It was very simple, actually. But
Yeah,
you had already learned a
absolutely.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So many assumptions had been tested at that point. I think that's another thing that sets Seasoned kind of aside from the competition or from agencies in general is that, and I know you've done this with other clients too, where you've recommended that they create some sort of paper prototype, right? Like whether or not it's actually on paper is not of concern. It's about creating some sort of real world solution that does not require code and also does not necessarily require bubble.io or any other
Yep.
no code solutions. And I think that's something that for me, like when I talk to first time founders or folks who are just starting out now, something I'm always recommending is build a paper prototype. Like think in your mind, what is the thing that tests these assumptions? And it could be like an email. It could be, right? Like when you really get down to what this prototype might be, it could be as simple as an email, really just talking to people, but there needs to be some way that founders test those assumptions before I think they jump in even to no code solutions. I know that you
Yeah.
really support that.
The extreme version of that is starting with a paid service. Like imagine, I know for Close Gap, at least this version, it wouldn't be possible to go and ask in person 600 kids how they were feeling this day.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
imagine that was possible
Right.
and financially viable. I,
Yeah.
I would think my mind goes there, and not even the paper prototype. It's like, how can I charge schools for me to go to the schools and interview personally
Yeah.
600 kids?
Yeah.
And the charging folks comes together, because if you can make a service financially sustainable, when you automate it, you're gonna like explode in terms of margins. If whenever you start with a service and then the pricing is already set for a service, you can say you're gonna, because you automated, price is gonna get half the price, but half the price will still be like wonderful margin. And
Yeah.
when you start with the tech, people expect free as the price.
It's
And
so true.
then it's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
So but that's my game. I
That's a good
don't recommend it for
approach.
everyone.
Yeah. And in
You
some
have to have a lot of
cases,
patience to
it's
play this
true.
game.
And in some cases, Close Gap is a good example of where it wouldn't be super suitable. Like one could try maybe with one classroom and you could see what happens. But I think there's a lot there for non-technical people to think about. And I love the service approach. Like if I was just one person offering a service to maybe another person, like a consumer business or, business, what would I be doing? Like what would that look like? And then kind of
Yeah.
scaling that up from there. I love that
Yeah.
approach.
One thing I never told people, at least in public, from the start, Seasoned, in my mind, is a low code product. It's not an agency.
Say more.
So
That's super juicy.
I feel a little even embarrassed telling this, because it's so far in the future that I don't like turning this into a value proposition or something like that. But that's the vision I have.
Say that in another way. I want to make sure I'm really clear on it.
I don't want to promise people that we are something that we're not right now. So we're an agency right now. I don't want to say that I'm building is a low code solution that will make software development 10 times faster, which is what I am building in my mind. Not in my mind, in our actions and in our internal communications. That's what we are building. But that was on my mind before we started Seasoned. Whenever I thought about this, it was like, I'm gonna start with this service and I'm gonna over time become more like a product than like an agency, but always maintaining the service layer. Just that we become more effective and efficient through process and technology. So it's not something I like to advertise now. It's not. I don't feel secure about advertising it, like shouting to the world that that's what we're building. But as you saw in the draft for the new positioning we're creating, we're starting to hint about this. Like we are 3 times faster, and we won't stop till we're 10x. Like this kind of communication is more like about who we are, because we won't stop till we get to 10x in productivity. We might not even ever get there, but that's who we are. That's what we're aiming for. But it's a great example of the patience around starting with service. Literally building an agency is starting with service. But
it's the most extreme service oriented. Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's just yet another thing that really sets Seasoned apart, is that instead of having this inflated like overhead and tons of staff and wanting to, keep your clients on for as long as possible, even if you're not serving them anymore, right? Like this very kind of inflated way of being an agency, you're actually quite like wanting to eliminate yourselves in a way, like you're becoming more product based and want to eliminate all of that, which is really beautiful. And it's something that I think founders should think more about, even when, it makes me think of like PR agencies that we've partnered with and all sorts of agencies who are really just trying to stay, on that paycheck, or really just trying to continue to get that monthly recurring, cost. And it's just a really different mindset that Seasoned has.
And also strategy, right? There's nothing bad about being a great PR agency that doesn't invest in R&D. There's nothing. You just train great people. People get good at their craft, and they serve clients well. And for the entrepreneurs of these agencies, this model might generate more profit in the short term. And that's nothing bad about that as well. The thing with me is that I wouldn't be motivated if it was just that. I need to feel that I'm improving the system for everyone. But it's a personal decision. I don't think our business is necessarily better than this other kind of agency. It's just a different approach. I think for some people it's 10 times better, but for others the more, let's call it, traditional agency approach, for others is better. You have to, you know this by being a former client, you have to deal with our lack of flexibility sometimes, because this is the way we work. Right. This is the technology we use. We won't use that other one. For you, it wasn't an issue, the tech stack, but sometimes the methodology, right? And you even contributed to us improving our methodology, because we were like, this is the way we work. And you say, but it's not working for me. And then we changed the way we work. But once we changed to the one new way we work, and we won't work any other way again.
Now,
Yeah, so sometimes having a more flexible agency that's just developing the craft is better. But when you want exceptional results, I think the more specialized and the more R&D focused agency is better.
I agree. I know what you mean, that one is not better than the other. It's more just like what you value and what you're oriented towards, which I'm
and what
always
you need.
oriented towards results. Yeah. But I do think there's some truth in traditional agencies. I think people get complacent. And I think that it's not only you who would find a lack of motivation there. I think that in traditional kind of agency settings where you're paying people to, do these sorts of things, I think that there is a certain amount of like paper pushing going on, right? They're just like, I want to make my hours. I want to just do work, even if it's just busy work. And that's just human nature, right? So I think for me, the traditional model concerns me because agency folks, and now I'm really thinking of a particular experience I've had recently, but it's, agency folks aren't really bought into the mission, especially in that sort of traditional setting. And so I think that people can kind of lose sight of the results. And so for me, when I hear about Seasoned, really you guys anchoring yourselves to R&D, wanting to perfect the process, wanting to use the best methodologies out there, wanting to be 10x faster than anyone else, that's better for me, at least, because I know that you're anchoring toward results and not just filling up time with doing things.
Yeah.
How does that sit with you?
I think I agree that for many people, I don't want to say everybody, because I know there's a lot of need. For example, in software, there are a lot of folks that just need someone to configure their ERP software. Would it be better if we had a lot of R&D around it? And I think we do have around ERP, by the way. Yes, but for most people, is that the best option? Maybe, I don't know. But coming back to us, I do agree with you that it's, for me at least, it's best. I'm creating the agency I would like to hire. But the complacency part is interesting. You said it's human nature, and I agree, because I see it in myself as well. Sometimes it would be easier for me to, let's bring a real example. When I was saying, this is the way we work, and to be specific, we had product owners on the team who were like acting like a middleman between tech and business, and they were not technical.
Like really lay this out for people, because I think it's going to be, so let's start over. Like really lay out the PO, how everything worked, because this is going to be interesting for folks.
So let's expand it, but let's remember that we have a point about the complacency to make at the end. Okay. So long story then. We started at Seasoned with a conscious decision of, instead of having a PO, which is a product owner, a very common role in tech, where it's someone who will translate the business needs and take it to the dev team and make sure the right product is being built. Instead of having the product owner, who usually is non-technical, in the sense of not being a programmer, very technical in their craft, the PO craft, we decided to have a CTO being the face and the main point of communication with the clients. And that's great when you're like 1, 2, 5, 10 people. Very, very hard when you jump from 10 to 40, which was what happened in 2020 with us. The client interacting with a CTO is excellent. It's a great experience, especially if the CTO navigates well the bridge between business and technology.
Yes.
And because we called ourselves Seasoned, that's what I wanted to offer from the beginning, because you're going to be dealing on a day-to-day basis with a seasoned technologist, let's call it. Yeah. And that when we had the opportunity to grow from 10 to 40 people in less than 1 year, I had to let go of this expectation, because I wouldn't be able to grow. And we decided to try the more traditional approach of having POs and having the seasoned technologists on the back office helping everybody, but not being the daily communication. We had a ton of friction with this, like a ton of friction, not only with you, with our clients. And it was worth the friction because we were able to grow and learn. But you pushed me. When we started, the friction became, and this is a very good point. Your budget was way smaller than our other clients at the moment. So you had to have more results for your month. And for the other clients, it wasn't that hard. They were feeling the friction. They understood, even though we had friction, we were like much better than the alternative that would be to build an internal team or to hire other agencies. They were like content, but they were not really happy. They were like, okay, this is working, and you was like, this is barely working because I need more, because my resources are limited, and I need to make sure we build more and more and more. For me to compare seasoned with building my own team, it's starting to feel like maybe building my own team would be better, because at least I would have more control and influence directly over the result. Maybe a smaller team, but 100% within my control would be better. And you were thinking about that. And we were discussing openly about this because we really prefer that clients really need us. And otherwise, I would recommend other approaches. But you told me the following. You said, I miss the daily communication. That's the expression I just came to my mind. The highly strategical, highly technical, daily communication.
I remember
that's exactly what you said.
Yeah.
And when you told me that, because I knew how hard it would be to scale the CTO role, I was kind of challenged, but at the same time not initially very open to it, because I was saying, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if that will ever come back, right? But serendipity is a great thing, because your conversation, I ended up feeling bad about not being able to provide this, which is something I wanted from the get-go. I think it was the same night or something, I went to Google and started researching to see if something came up, and I found ShapeUp. Yes. And
which
then
reconfigured everything in the best way.
And then it was like, oh my God, I think we can. It's gonna be hard anyway, because hiring CTOs, it's the bottleneck for season for sure. But it's gonna be hard, but it's doable. Like I was like, I don't know if we can do it. Yes, we can do. And then we started experimenting with ShapeUp, initially with you, because you read the book, you bought the concept, you said, okay, I'm down for it. And then instead of having the PO as the point person, we brought a CTO to this place, but doing shaping, which is the one aspect of ShapeUp. And the other benefits of ShapeUp made this investment worthwhile. And then we transitioned away from Scrum, which was the methodology we were trying to use at the time, our version. We always customize the methodology to ShapeUp, and that was a game changer. Like everything started working after we did that. Of course, it's very hard to run a ShapeUp operation. It's very, very hard. But we were qualified for it, and it was a great fit for us, and it worked.
I want to speak more to, well, first I want you to finish your complacency thought, because I know I interjected.
I don't remember where I was going to. Let's continue.
Move it on. Okay. I was like, I'm going to put that in my mind. So something that that I want to move into a bit more. We've been talking about this with Shape Up already, but seasoned is an outlier for so many different reasons. And I know you have like a challenging relationship with that truth for so many reasons. But the reason that I think that seasoned is so different is because of the way you guys do things internally. It's vastly different than the way other dev shops or agencies function. And so you once said to me that you believe that seasoned has become a competence-driven culture. That the reason that the company is doing so well is because of the people, and not only the team members, but it's because of the team members and the tools and methodologies and technologies that you've adopted and perfected over time. One of those being Shape Up. But I would love for you to speak to all of those things. And we can take it one by one, but I would love for you to just share with everyone how Seasoned functions internally. So if maybe another agency is listening, they might be able to take away 3 or 4 things that they could implement. If a founder's listening, they will understand how you function internally and why you can be 3x faster now, 10x faster in a few months, hopefully. So share with us.
I'll settle with a few years.
Yeah, a few years. I'm like, more. Faster.
That's the spirit. That's the spirit.
Both
at the
I
same
bring
time.
that energy to the table. Yeah.
And if we bring that energy together with the energy of patience, that's when we explode.
Right, like a groundedness that underpins that level of growth. Yeah.
Since you mentioned how we do it, there's a lot to unpack here. But I have to start with the business model and the monetization model, because that's really where it starts. My past agency failed, not because we were younger, we didn't know what we're doing, all that. But there's one fundamental thing that led us to fail, and we were very successful. Fail in the sense of not scaling only, because we were very successful with small agencies. We just couldn't scale and couldn't invest as much in R&D, culture, and etc. But the only reason is because the market has a standard, and it's interesting. We should get into the pressure you had from your board, if you're comfortable with that. Around this, because we charge upfront for the month, and the market pays 90 days later. 90 days later means like 60 days after the month is done.
Right.
The market usually is when the average company that hires an agency pays.
Yeah, so it's like net 60 on an invoice.
Exactly that. And we charge before the service starts. That's very challenging for some people to take the leap of faith around this. But it changes the game for us. Because we have a positive cash flow cycle, we can, whenever we need to grow, we can immediately invest in R&D and other stuff. We can immediately use the cash to invest immediately. When we had the growth spurt of 2020 from 10 to 40 that I was talking about, wouldn't be able to make it if we had a net 60 billing cycle. Because what we had to do is we had to grow from 10 to 40 within a few months. The R&D necessary to be able to sustain the 40 had to start together with the growth spurt. Otherwise, we wouldn't see the results later on.
Right.
And when you brought the feedback to me that the methodology we had wasn't working for you, we were able to say, okay, let's put a CTO right away, even though you didn't pay anything extra for us.
Right.
And it's not the pricing model, it's the billing cycle. Technically, it's the float we generate. We generate float, and the float can be invested into anything we want, usually R&D, recruiting, culture. One thing that we did during the spurt was bringing on seasoned leadership.
Absolutely.
Because we had the resources to do that because of the billing cycle.
It might just be worth saying, because from my experience, I would talk to my board, I would talk to my philanthropic investors, and they would say, oh, no, that's not how dev shops work. That's not how agencies work. You should be paying them 3 months afterwards. What are you talking about? You can't pay them up front. And I just want to highlight again, because you just put it perfectly, but even more succinctly might be helpful. When you are paid up front, you are able to iterate and adjust and perfect things in ways that traditional dev shops are unable to do, because they won't get that money in for 90 days. That's huge. It's huge.
Yep.
So like you said...
they take on debt, right? Or they take on a lot of debt.
Absolutely. And then, of course, they experience, employee turnover and what have you, which brings a whole host of other problems. And so I think it's really important, again, to underpin how much, what those resources, what that money does up front for you guys as an agency. It almost makes it so you can behave like you're not an agency, which is what every client wants. Yeah. Right? So when I come to you and I say, Daniel, this isn't working. This process is wrong. That's wrong. We got to do this. We should do this. And you and I, of course, co-create around it. Instead of just talking nonsense and nothing happening, you can actually do what you need to do on your end, which in our case was put a CTO in.
Being able not to make even one exception to this rule for the 5 years we've been in business is what allowed us to happen. And I only have the determination, the guts to stick to this because I've been there in the past. I've made this mistake in the past, and it made it impossible to grow in the sense of get better. But it's very, very hard to stick to our guns when negotiating this. The only thing that makes people hire us, even though we have this motto, is our reputation. Like our reputation and the fact that we bring a lot of value during the sales cycle. So we captivate the client before they had to pay a dime.
Absolutely. And you're captivating, but you're also delivering value. Because there's a lot of, advice and guidance that you offer during that time.
Yeah, captivating in that sense, much more than anything else. We help the client gain clarity and precision around the product before they engage with us. And then once they compare that to other firms, they'll say, maybe I should pay upfront for these guys. Because they already feel like a partner, but I mean, it takes a lot of determination and clarity to be able to stick to this rule of cash flow positive always.
Yeah, and I also think it speaks to the level of, we can innovate with software, we can innovate with ideas, but I think that there's always room to innovate in business model, in billing cycle, in your case, even in my case with entity structure, with all of these kind of more administrative things that we take for granted. We just accept, that's the way the billing cycle works. That's the way this entity structure works. When in reality, all of these things should be tools to help us reach our mission. And I think that you're doing that really well with the billing cycle change.
Yeah. Just came to mind something whenever someone says, because you said it really well, but all agencies charge net 60. And I say, but you're the same person that's recommending people not to use agencies.
Exactly.
And that's why.
That's what I was thinking. They're like, agencies are awful. Don't pay them for 90 days. It's like, I wonder why they're awful.
But of course, no. It's very. I wanted to start with this because the business model is the enabler for all the rest. But the thing that sets us apart, I think, is that we're nerds that really love to think how to build better software and at scale. Like there are a lot of people who really like to craft software really well, and we also do that. But we're gonna do that at a bigger scale than most people can. It's a long-term commitment but it's more like that, more like who we are actually. When we were thinking about the new positioning that probably will be launched soon, we were trying to find something that represents who we really are from the inside and the outside at the same time. And the idea that we're builders, but we're builders with a plan, right? We're like, we want to build more and more and better and better and better and better, and not only strategize, not only craft, we want to build. But don't know if the distinction between craft and build here is clear, but it's a sentiment.
Maybe give us definitions of what you mean. I think I know, but I think it's worth speaking more to that.
When I said strategize, I was thinking about the folks that do design thinking consultancy or innovation consultancy, which is great, and we have some of that in our DNA. But I never was able to work with this kind of work. I tried to. I never could, because we could spend 80% of our time designing and sometimes less than 20% building. Because your work is to create the strategy, create the design, create the innovation, etc. And that's not for me, and by consequence not for Felipe, because we got together because of this. And then we started building a team that over time, what we understood is that we like to build stuff. We don't like only to think. We like to build the right stuff. So we need strategy. But we like to build. We're builders. And then the other part, which is craft, I was thinking about why I never was satisfied with only building one product. I had a few startups in my life, and I was never really happy by just like crafting this beautiful thing. And it was nice. Don't get me wrong. It's nice to craft a beautiful thing. But I wanted, I don't know what, but I wanted more than that, which is what I'm calling build here. And hugely inspired by Peter Thiel, I would say that when I say build, I'm talking about having a vision of the future that's at the same time optimistic and determined. I know where I'm headed. I know what we need to do. Because I'm optimistic about the future and I know what we need to do, let's build. Because that's
right.
After you know what you need to do, after you're optimistic that you're gonna go there, it's time to build, right?
That is so powerful. I wrote something down that you said. I once asked you, what problem are you solving? And you said, I'm solving the problem how to consistently launch and scale technology software products fast. And it reminds me of what you're talking about in this building energetic.
Yes.
And it really is different from what other folks are doing. We can put a pin in that for a moment. But for me, when I hear you talking, I think about really the world that we're building at a grand scale. Yeah. And the fact that software is playing such a huge role in every aspect of our lives, and that will only become more and more true as we continue on into the future. And so if that's true, then realizing the immense need we have for people who build and who build well.
Yeah.
So who don't necessarily get stuck in, or not stuck. I'm not quite sure how to conceptualize this, but the way that I think about it is people not becoming too overwhelmed or preoccupied with strategizing, designing, kind of like all that whole kind of area in the production process, if you will. Not getting stuck there, but the people who know where we need to go, the people who can see it, the people who have the strong North Star and who are oriented strongly toward it, those people needing to build software well. And so when you say we build with a plan, I can't think of anything more potent and powerful for what's required in technology today.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful because that's what I see as well. It's very interesting. Historically, I'm not the guy, even though I've been doing this for 25 years, I was never like, I love software. Like, this software is the thing that I like the most. But it's so important that I feel like I have to love it. And I keep coming back and back to it. It wasn't like every time I went away from software, I ended up facing a challenge for which software was the best solution. And then I came back to software. So sometimes I think it's me because I've been around software from an early age. So I can see where software can become a solution. I always come back to software. It's not like I decided early in my life that I love this was my career, etc. No, I have the need for building software because I see how much we can achieve through it, and technology in general, right? Just that software is eating the world faster than other technologies. It is.
It's so true. It makes me reflect on my experience even as a non-technical person, like continuing to come back to software and just noticing how many problems can be solved with the use of technology. We'll use that as a broader term, like you said. And just even as a non-technical person, I'm like, oh, this would be such a clever way to insert technology and fix this problem, or at least aid this problem in some way. Yeah. And you've had quite an experience with being a musician, being a dancer, like having a skill set that absolutely exists outside of technology, and then continuing to come back to it throughout your life.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It also helped that software paid a lot more than music and dance as well.
I know.
So
if only music could pay more.
But I had to come back to it for other reasons as well. When I had my tango school, where we were teaching how to dance the tango, because it was such a challenging business, I had to take advantage of technology to be able to scale something up.
Oh, wow.
Right? So even for Ganas, which was the name of my school, basically marketing automation. Everything around marketing was automated for us. From Facebook ads, which was the biggest channel we used, until the whole landing pages, website, it was all integrated. And I didn't use like off-the-shelf tools for that. I built software for that, because I had the skill set, and I felt I would automate it better than the off-the-shelf. Not better for everyone, but better for us. Like the very bespoke solution that we needed. And in the end, I wanted to spend more of my day dancing or teaching,
doing tech stuff,
and I was coding.
Okay, talking about bespoke solutions, I would love to return back to what methodologies and tools Seasoned uses.
There are 3 pillars, I would say, to our differentiation, which is the first one is method, we have a very specific way of doing things. We already touched on it a little bit, which is Shape Up, our version of it. I'll dive deeper in a second. The second pillar is our tech stack. And together with this is specialization in one tech stack. We don't do multiple tech stacks. We do our tech stack. We might change it over time, but it's sequential, not parallel.
Okay.
And the third one is people and culture, which is people, culture and people, almost the same thing. And by that, I mean great talent as well, but also great, a culture that develops talent, not only that attracts talent. And this is, of course, the hardest to scale. In terms of the method, we use a method that's based on ShapeUp. We created our own tool, talking about coming back to software. We created our own software for managing a ShapeUp in a way that works perfectly for us, not necessarily for other companies, but I think, yes, for other companies as well. They just wanted to be very aligned with our way of doing stuff. And ShapeUp is a method where you basically have 3 stages. The first one is called framing. And you basically frame the problem you're trying to solve in a big picture kind of way.
Right.
But you already start having a sense of how much you want to invest into solving this problem. Imagine you say I'm going to use a close gap example because we talked about this often. You want to redesign the dashboard because over time we added a lot of stuff there, and we wanted to make it more make it simpler to use, for example. Then we will, at this stage, narrow down the problem really well and make sure redesign means the same thing for me, for you, for the whole team.
Right.
Because redesign is what on ShapeUp they call this like a grab bag.
Totally. And the framing is also where everyone comes together and starts creating shared language.
Yes,
like there were
exactly.
so many times, with Close Gap where one person would be calling something one thing and I would be calling it another thing. And it's where everyone kind of convenes, gets the shared language, talks about things in the same exact way, gets on the same page more or less.
Yes. And the output of framing is this kind of alignment around the problem we're trying to solve, maybe with a hint of the solution. Together, you also have a range of investment. We call this on ShapeUp, which, by the way, I need to mention, ShapeUp is a methodology by Basecamp. And you should look it up at basecamp.com/ShapeUp right now. Stop this.
And we can link it too, because we talked about so many resources. We can link all the goodies.
Yeah. And then you have a range of appetite for investment. You say, okay, I know if we invest more than 6 weeks of our team in this redesign, I would feel like throwing money away. So it's not adequate. But I also want to give it the proper attention. So let's say from 3 to 6 weeks of time. That's the output of framing. And then comes shaping.
And just so folks really understand the appetite piece, it's really interesting as the client or in the founder perspective, because let's take redesigning the dashboard. That could be a 2-month project, right? That could be, or we'll keep it at 6 weeks. So it could be a 6-week project where we just focus all of our attention and effort into really perfecting the dashboard. And that 6-week will have some sort of outcome, right?
Yeah.
And then, but if your appetite, you could also approach the same exact problem, but with an appetite of 1 to 2 weeks, right? And the result will be incredibly different. But it's important for founders to think about how much time energy and effort are you willing to invest to solve this problem? The appetite was always a really interesting moment of friction for me, because I was like, oh my God, I want to spend all the time on it to perfect it, right? I really have an eye for it being perfect and what it needs to be. But then I'm incredibly oriented toward, no, let's spend 2 days, let's get it out there and see what happens. So the appetite for some folks will be a really interesting exercise to move through.
And it's a back and forth. You can, we can ask you questions, and you say from 2 to 6 weeks, or from 3 in our example. And over time, when we create a solution, maybe we create a solution that requires 8 weeks. Right. And you look at the solution and say, oh my God, this is awesome. This will solve all our problems. Let's use 8 weeks for this.
Right.
This kind of thing happens a lot. Or the opposite. Totally. We cannot come up with a great solution, but there's this one little workaround that feels right. Right. And then the appetite changes from 3 to 6 to 1 week.
Absolutely. So the appetite's such an interesting experience. Yeah.
But then on the shaping phase, what we do is that we design the solution based on the appetite. While we do that, we're going to move the appetite from a range to fixed appetite. The appetite is 5 weeks, but we only move from a range to a fixed appetite after we did a little bit of shaping, of designing the solution. The output of shaping is a document that we call the pitch for the project that already mitigated the bulk of the risk of the project. Right. It's not micromanagement of the developer's work, in a sense that where you say exactly what are the tasks, but you mitigated the chance of imagine software development involves risks, a lot of risk. Imagine you could start the redesign and it could easily end up taking 3 months because we were not conscious of the appetite. We were iterating freely, or there's a lot of ways we can end up spending so much more. Or we found a rabbit hole, a technical rabbit hole or a business rabbit hole. We thought we were able to do it this way, but for this integration with this other ad tech, it won't work. Right. All this kind of stuff. So what shaping does is framing and shaping, by the way, but it's shaping's responsibility to mitigate the risk from what we call a fat-tailed risk. Something that has a fat-tailed risk can vary from 3 to 30. This is more like an order of magnitude, a margin of error, to a thin-tailed risk, where you still have variation, but it's from 3 to 4, from 3 to 5 tops. And then you won't literally throw bad money after bad money into a problem when you haven't mitigated the risk. So the output of shaping is a pitch that mitigated the risk of the project, not in a sense of making it all predictive. It's never, software development is never predictable, but it mitigated the bulk of the risk.
Yes, so it mitigates the risk. And you mentioned this too, but I think it's worth highlighting again, that it's not about laying out exactly what the developers are going to do. Yeah. The pitch is not like a task list or, like you said, predictive, this is exactly how it's going to go. It actually focuses mainly on the risks and, as you said, just mitigates them, right? And really starts to begin to put the project into a shape and a texture.
Exactly. Yeah. But the developers and designers get the pitch, read the pitch, and we have a kickoff meeting, and then we start the building phase. The building phase ideally lasts for the appetite of the project and not more. Right. Sometimes we'll decide to extend it, but it will be a conscious decision, and we usually only do that if we feel like we're already at the very end of things, there's no risk involved, Otherwise, we
Right.
would recommend, if we use the appetite and we don't get to the solution, we recommend you to go back to the drawing board, frame the problem again, shape it again. And
Well,
in
yeah,
the
and
end,
that's what it would mean if we didn't
yeah,
solve the problem. Then something happened during framing and shaping that was
yeah,
not what needed to happen.
or there was a rabbit hole that we
Maybe
didn't
technical rabbit holes.
mitigate,
True, true.
something like that. And then it's not that we are trying to make it predictable, even though it becomes consistent. What we're trying to avoid is that the bet you're making. If you're betting 3 weeks in redesigning the dashboard, as an example again, the maximum downside for your bet is 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, you can decide to extend it a little bit, but it's another bet because you're gonna see where we are, and you're
Right.
gonna decide, okay, let's make it 4.
Yeah.
But it won't happen what usually happens in software projects, which is, oh, we couldn't do it. You have a weekly sprint call in Scrum. Oh, we couldn't get to the solution this week, but if we feel like next week we will, and then next week comes and not yet. This came up, and then
Right.
and then because it's a very iterative process, it feels like both sides are in charge of these decisions. But because no one took a step back and shaped the solution for real, both sides are actually micromanaging each other on a weekly basis, and
Yes.
yes.
Yes. It's so important. Oh my God. Yeah.
But that's the building. After you
Right.
build, you deliver, and you start the cycle again. And the difference in shape up is that you have parallel tracks. It's not necessarily sequential. The same
Right.
team does the framing, the same team does the shaping, the same team does the building. Right now at Season, we have the CTO doing the framing and the shaping, and the client does a lot of the framing, because it's
Right.
perfectly doable for our
Yes.
clients to do the framing. And the
And I would
more
say
the
it
client brings the
saves
framing, the
time.
better.
Right.
Saves time
Yeah.
and resources.
Yes.
Yeah. We have then another team, which is the building team, the developers, designers, building. And usually when they end a project, the next project is already ready, shaped, the pitch is ready, and we start a new one. That's a long explanation, which feels short because there's much more to it.
You did a really good job explaining that. I'm wondering, I think the language bets sometimes sounds problematic because
Yes.
a bet typically in gambling is, a bet. And so the only thing I would highlight is bet is in this framework is a very, very de-risked bet.
Yeah.
Right. So in
Yeah.
a lot of ways, I still like the language bet. I still appreciate it. But just for folks who are just getting into shape up or just learning, bet sounds very extreme. It's not. It's
Yeah.
very de-risked because of what takes place in the framing and shaping process.
Yeah, it's the opposite of a gamble.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of a gamble, but it's still a bet.
Yes. There's still some risk, which is
Yeah.
true in all software development, right? And
Yeah.
I think that that's something, this was to your point that you made very early on, was that most people kind of forget that software development is really hard, or that it is risky, or that it does involve bets. And I think it's just something important for everyone to remember that everything we build is an experiment. And that's awesome because it means we get to learn from everything, but
Yeah.
it's not, it's not perfect and written in stone. And that's actually fun because then there's room for improvement and more creative opportunities along the way.
And since we spoke a lot about the method today, I think I'm going to leave the stack and the culture for other moments.
Yes.
Just going to give a hint about, for the stack, we try to come up with an open source stack that's really, really productive. Where when you know what to build from the shaping, right, you can just go and build it without too much what we call boilerplate, which is like code that's not necessary to be built.
All right, everyone. Well, that's a wrap on the Dare to Build podcast. We have our first episode in the books. We're done.
Yes.
Daniel, it was so fun to talk to you about all of these amazing topics. I can't wait to get into our next one.
Listen, it's a huge pleasure to be having these conversations with you, especially because I always enjoy this back and forth we have. So welcome, and episode 1 is out there.
Yes, thank you, everyone.